All right, now moving on to pediatric dosage calculation. Question 1. The HCP prescribes ceftriaxone, an antibiotic, for a child with meningitis that weighs 37 pounds. So focus on the 37 pounds here. Now, the safe dose of this drug is 100 milligrams per kilogram per day, not to exceed that 2 grams per day. So what is the safe dose per day for this child? And remember, we have to calculate the child's dose using dimensional analysis and record your answer to the 10th place. Okay, so first identify what you're solving for. So we're solving for the child's safe daily dose in milligrams per day. Now, there's multiple ways to set up this equation. First, we're going to use my way, and then the rest of the questions, we're going to show you dimensional analysis. So what I like to do is I like to take the weight and divide that by 2.2 to get kilograms first. Now, this, for me, makes it a lot cleaner and a lot simpler. So we get 16.818 kilograms. Now, the question states 100 milligrams per kilogram per day. So we simply take 100 milligrams and times that by the child's kilograms, right? So 100 times 16.818 gives us a grand total of 1,681.8. So a big side note here. This dose does not exceed the 2 grams per day. So the correct answer is 1,681.8 milligrams per day, which is a safe dose for this child. Now, moving on to question 2. The healthcare provider prescribes acetaminophen for an infant who weighs 12 pounds. So 12 pounds, we're obviously going to have to convert that to kilograms. So the safe dose for acetaminophen is 15 milligrams per kilogram per dose, not to exceed 5 doses per day. So the question's asking, what is the maximum safe daily dose for the infant? And we have to calculate the infant's maximum safe daily dose using dimensional analysis and record the answer using a whole number here. Okay, so now let's set this up in the big long equation of dimensional analysis. So in question 1, we just simply took the pounds and divided by 2.2 to get kilograms. So let me show you another way with dimensional analysis here. So first up, we're solving for x, for milligrams per day. And we set up this big long equation. So we have 15 milligrams over 1 kilogram, right? And then the next thing is 1 kilogram over 2.2 because we're solving for kilograms. And the client weighs 12 pounds over 1 dose. And the very last one is 5 doses in 1 day. Now we simply multiply across. So 15 times 1 times 12 times 5 is 900. And we multiply across the bottom here, and we get 2.2. So 900 divided by 2.2, we have 409. So the correct answer here is 409 milligrams per day. Now moving on to question 3 here. The provider prescribes diphenhydramine for a child who weighs 50 pounds. So the safe dose for this drug is 1 to 1.25 milligrams per kilogram per dose. So what is the safe dose range for this child? All right, so let's set up the dimensional analysis here. So we are solving for x milligrams per dose, right? So 1 milligram goes on top and 1 kilo goes on the bottom. And then we put 1 kilo over 2.2 pounds, so 50 over 1 dose. Okay, now simply multiply across and multiply the numbers on the bottom here. So we get 50 over 2.2. And then with simple division, we have 22.7 here. Okay, we're not done just yet because the question's asking us a range here between 1 milligram per kilogram and 1.25 milligrams per kilogram. So we're doing the same exact thing, but instead of using 1 milligram, we're using 1.25 milligrams. So set it up the same way. X milligrams per dose, then we're putting 1.25 milligrams over 1 kilogram, and then 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds, and then 50 pounds for that one dose here. So as you can see, we're just cross-canceling out everything to get milligrams per dose. So we multiply the top row and we multiply the bottom row. So we get 62.5 over 2.2. So our max range here is 28.4. So the answer here is 22.7 to 28.4 milligrams per dose is the safe dose range here. Now, question number 4, the provider prescribes IV drip of dobutamine for a child that weighs 75 pounds. The safe dose range for dobutamine is 5 to 20 micrograms per kilogram here. So what is the safe dose range for this child? All right, so let's set this big, huge equation up, starting with the low end, 5 here. So obviously, we're solving for micrograms per dose. So we're using the number 5 because that's the lower dose from between the 5 and 20, right? So 5 micrograms over 1 kilogram, then 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds because it's asking us to solve with using those kilograms, right? Then 75 pounds over 1 dose here. So now we simply multiply across on the top and multiply across on the bottom. So we get 375 over 2.2. Now our correct answer is 170.4, but we have to round down here. So 170 is that low range. Okay, now we're doing the same exact thing because the question's asking for the high range of 20 micrograms per kilogram. So we're setting it up the same way for the max safe dose here. So we have X micrograms per dose. So instead of using 5, we're using 20 micrograms on top, and then 1 kilogram, and then 1 kilogram on top, and 2.2 pounds. And the client weighs 75 pounds over 1 dose. Now we're simply multiplying across and the bottom. So we get 1,500 over 2.2, and we get a grand total of 681.8. So we're rounding down here to 681. So the correct answer is 170 to 681 micrograms per dose. Now, a big noteworthy key point here is we never round up for a safe dose, especially for pediatrics. So remember, little children, we always keep the numbers. We don't round up. Now, most exams test like this just because we want to keep the client safe. Now for question 5, the provider prescribes an oral dose of amoxicillin for a child that weighs 88 pounds. Now the safe dose of amoxicillin is 30 milligrams per kilogram in 12 hours or every 12 hours. So what is the max daily dose for the child here? All right, so let's set up our equation here. We are solving for X milligrams per day. So that is 30 milligrams over the 1 kilogram. Because remember, we have to convert those pounds into kilograms, right? Then we have 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds. The client weighs 88 pounds over 1 dose. And we're giving 2 doses here in a day. Because the question is telling us to give it every 12 hours. So that is 2 doses, right? Okay, now solving for X milligrams per day. We have to multiply the numbers across and on the bottom here. So we get 5,280 over 2.2. Now our grand total is 2,400. So the correct answer is 2,400 milligrams per day. Now moving on to question 6, the provider prescribes an oral dose of ibuprofen for a child who weighs 75 pounds. Now, the safe dose of ibuprofen is 4 to 10 milligrams per kilogram per dose. So what is the safe dose range for this child? All right, so as usual, we're converting those pounds to kilos and then finding the safe dose range. So using dimensional analysis, we're solving for X, right? X milligrams per dose. So let's start with the low range here. So setting up our formula, 4 milligrams over 1 kilogram times 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds because we have to convert that, right? We can't be given it in pounds. And the last one is 75 pounds over one dose because the little child weighs 75 pounds. So multiplying the top row and multiplying the bottom row, we get 300 over 2.2. So our correct answer here is 136.3. And remember, we never round up here for safe dose ranges for pediatrics. So our low dose is 136 here. Okay, now let's calculate the maximum safe dose range. So once again, we have X milligrams per dose, but instead of using the 4, we're using the 10 because that is the max, right? So 10 milligrams over 1 kilogram times 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds times 75 pounds over one dose. So once again, multiply the top row and the bottom row. We get 750 over 2.2. Now here's where students mess up. As you can see, it's 340.9. Most students want to round up for 341, right? No, we do not round up the dose for pediatric questions. So our max dose range is 340. So the correct answer here is 136 milligrams to 340 milligrams per dose. This is the low end and the max, or basically highest end here. Now for question 7, the provider prescribes an oral dose of prednisolone, or as I like to call, prednisolone, for a child who weighs 30 pounds. So the safe dose of this drug is 2 milligrams per kilogram per day. All right, so they're not giving us a range, so it's good here. It's a little easier. What is the safe daily dose for the child? All right, we're simply setting this up. So obviously we're solving for X milligrams per day, right? So we set it up 2 milligrams over 1 kilogram. And we have to convert those pounds, right? So 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds, and we have 30 pounds over 1 day. Now we simply multiply across and on the bottom. And we get a number of 27.2. So our correct answer is 27 milligrams here. Now, moving on to question 8, the provider prescribes azithromycin, the antibiotic, for a child with strep throat who weighs 45 pounds. Now, the safe dose of the antibiotic is 10 to 12 milligrams per kilogram per day. So, what is the safe dose range for the child? So, as usual, let's set up our equation here. So, on the left, X milligrams per day is what we're solving for, right? So, we put that low range, 10 milligrams over 1 kilogram, because we have to convert those pounds to kilos. Then we have 1 kilogram on top and 2.2 pounds on the bottom. And the child weighs 45 pounds over 1 day because the question's asking for 1 day. All right, now simply multiply the numbers across on the top and the bottom. So we get a grand total of 450 on top and 2.2 on the bottom. So now our number looks like this, 204.54. So we're going to choose 204.5 here. Now the next thing is to calculate the maximum dose here. So with the question helping us, we are solving for X milligrams per day, and instead of using 10, we're using 12 milligrams because that's the max dose, right? And then everything else is pretty much the same. So 12 milligrams over 1 kilogram times 1 kilogram over 2.2, and then 45 pounds per dose here, right? So multiplying across, we get 540 over 2.2. Now our grand total is 245.45. So we're dropping that last number to get 245.4. So our correct answer here is 204.5 milligrams to 245.4 milligrams here. And remember, we are not rounding here for pediatric questions when they're asking for that safe dose. All right, moving on to question 9. The provider prescribes ondansetron intravenously for a client who weighs 72 pounds. The safe dose of this drug is 0.15 milligrams per kilogram. What is the safe dose range for this child here? So as usual, we're just taking that first number here, and we're solving for that. So let's set it up. We're solving for X milligrams. So taking that first number, 0.15, we're putting 0.15 milligrams on top over 1 kilogram. And as usual, 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds. And our very last one is the client's weight, 72 pounds. Now it's asking for one dose, so we put the number 1. Now that all the targets are set up, let's multiply across the top and multiply across on the bottom. So we get 10.8 over 2.2. So our correct answer here is 4.9. Now remember, in pediatric questions, you do not round up that dose. Where we're using. Now moving on to question 10, the provider prescribes midazolam, which is to be given IV push for a child who's scheduled for bone marrow biopsy and weighs 100 pounds. So as you guys know, this is a benzodiazepine to help alleviate anxiety. Now the safe dose range of this drug, midazolam, is 0.05 to 0.1 milligrams per kilogram, not to exceed 6 milligrams. So what is the safe dose range for this child? All right, let's set it up as we usually do here. So we're taking that first number the question gives us, and we're plugging it in. 0.05 milligrams over 1 kilogram, because we got to convert those pounds to kilos, right? And then 1 kilogram over 2.2, and the very last one is 100 pounds, because the child weighs 100 pounds over 1, which is 1 dose, right? So when we multiply the numbers across and on the bottom, we get 5 over 2.2. So we get a grand total of 2.27. And remember, we're not rounding here, so we have 2.2 because the question is asking us to get to that 10th place. Okay, now what is the max dose here? So let's set that up. It's exactly the same thing, but we're using that different number for the max range. So instead of 0.05, we're using 0.1 milligrams over that same 1 kilogram. And then everything else is the same. 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds times 100 pounds over 1 dose, right? So we do the same math. We multiply across and we get 10 over 2.2. So our max dose range is 4.54 here. And remember, we're not rounding, so we get 4.5. Now our correct answer is 2.2 milligrams to 4.5 milligrams. And remember, this is a pediatric question, so don't round up. Really don't round at all. Now, moving on to question 11, the provider prescribes epinephrine, 1 per 1,000 by intramuscular, that IM injection, for a child who weighs 65 pounds. Now, the safe dose is 0.01 milligrams per kilogram. What is the safe dose for the child here? All right, so as usual, let's set it up. X milligrams is what we're solving for, right? So just take that safe dose range. So 0.01 milligrams over that 1 kilogram, and then 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds. And then lastly is the child's weight, 65 pounds over 1 for 1 dose. So we're multiplying across and on the bottom. So we get 0.65 over 2.2, and then we divide. So we have 0.29. Now, this is very tempting to round up, but we don't here. So remember, on pediatric questions, you do not round up the dose. So our correct answer here is 0.2 milligrams. Now for question 12. The provider prescribes gentamicin 2.5 milligrams per kilogram, IV, for a child who is septic and weighs 45 pounds. The safe dose is 2.5 milligrams per kilogram. So what is a safe dose for this child? Okay, now I know this sounds like a trick question because the safe dose is the same as the prescribed dose. But using the same dimensional analysis, let's just plug in our numbers here, right? So we always start with the safe dose range here. So we have 2.5 milligrams over 1 kilogram and 1 kilogram over 2.2, and then simply plug in the child's weight, 45 pounds over that one dose. So we multiply across and on the bottom. So we get 112.5 over 2.2. So we get now 51.1. Remember, we are not rounding here. So we simply have 51. So our correct answer is 51 milligrams. Now for question 13, the provider prescribes magnesium sulfate for a child who weighs 55 pounds. Now the safe dose for magnesium sulfate is 75 milligrams per kilogram. What is the safe dose for the child here? So as usual, we're setting up our equation. We're solving for x milligrams. So simply put that first number in, 75 milligrams on top and kilogram on the bottom, because it's milligrams per kilogram, right? Then we're converting those pounds to kilos. So we have 1 kilo on top over 2.2 pounds. And then simply plug in the child's weight, 55 pounds over 1 for 1 dose here. Now we multiply across and on the bottom. So we get 4,125 over 2.2. Then we simply divide. We get 1875. So the correct answer is 1,875 milligrams. So what is the safe dose range? Now, moving on to question 14, the provider prescribes digoxin, the toxin here, for a child who weighs 99 pounds. The safe dose range of digoxin is 8 to 12 micrograms per kilogram per day. So what is the safe dose range for this child here? All right, so let's set up the formula as usual. So we have X micrograms per day. So let's take that first number, 8 to 12. So we're taking 8 and plugging it in as our first number. So 8 micrograms over 1 kilogram. And then we're converting pounds to kilograms. So we have 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds. And our last thing is plugging in the child's weight, 99 pounds over that 1 for 1 dose. Okay, now multiply the numbers across and on the bottom here. So we get the grand total of 792 over 2.2. So our low range is 360 because we just divided it here. Now, what about the high range? Well, we're simply just changing one number. We're changing that 8 micrograms to 12. So same exact thing here. X micrograms per day, and the only thing we're changing is that 12 micrograms for the high dose. So that's over 1 kilogram, and then 1 kilo over 2.2 pounds, and then the same weight, because the child hasn't changed weight, right? 99 pounds over that 1 dose. Okay, so multiplying across and on the bottom here, we get 1188 over 2.2. So once we divide, we have a max dose of 540. So our correct answer for a safe dose range is 360 micrograms to 540 micrograms. Now, moving on to question 15. The provider prescribes valproic acid for a child with status epilepticus who weighs 30 pounds. Now, the safe dose range of this is 20 milligrams per kilogram for the loading dose. So what is the safe loading dose for this child? All right, same exact way we've done everything. Let's set up the formula here. We're solving for X milligrams, right? So take the number for valproic acid that the question has given you. So 20 milligrams, right? We're doing 20 milligrams over kilograms. And then we're putting the kilograms on top and the pounds on the bottom because we have to convert that, right? So 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds. And then we're just simply plugging in the child's weight, 30 pounds for that 1 dose. Now we multiply across and multiply across on the bottom. So our grand total here is 600 on top and 2.2 on the bottom. So we get 272.7. Now, I know it's really tempting to round up, but on pediatric questions, you do not want to round up the dose. So our correct answer here is 272 milligrams. Now for question 16, the provider prescribes ketorolac, the NSAID, for a child who weighs 90 pounds. So the safe dose for ketorolac is 0.5 milligrams per kilogram. So what is the safe dose for this child? All right, as usual, let the question help you here. So the question's asking for the safe dose of ketorolac is 0.5 milligrams per kilogram, right? So let's set up the equation. We're solving for X milligrams. And let the question help you here. Just plug in the number 0.5 milligrams and it's asking per kilogram. Now we're converting those pounds to kilos. So 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds and simply plug in the child's weight, 90 pounds, over that 1 for 1 dose. All right, so we're multiplying across and on the bottom. So we get 45 over 2.2, and we get the number 20.4. So our grand total and our answer here is 20 milligrams. Now for question 17, the provider prescribes clindamycin for a child who weighs 45 pounds. So the safe dose range for clindamycin, the antibiotic, is 10 to 13 milligrams per kilogram per dose. So what is that safe dose range for this child? All right, so let's start with the lower dose here. Let's start with that 10 for 10 to 13 milligrams. So let's set up our equation. We're solving for X milligrams per dose. So 10 milligrams on top per 1 kilogram. Then we're converting those kilos or converting those pounds to kilos. So 1 kilo on top and 2.2 pounds. And then simply plug in the child's weight. So 45 pounds over 1 dose. Okay, now that everything's set up, we can just multiply across and multiply across on the bottom. So 450 over 2.2. And we get the grand total of 204.5. Now, I know it's super tempting to round up, but we don't want to do that with pediatric questions. All right, now let's solve for the higher end dose. So we're doing exactly the same thing we just did. We're just plugging in one new number. So we have 13 milligrams per kilogram, and everything else is the same. 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds, and the same exact weight, right? 45 pounds over that 1 dose. Now we multiply across on the top and multiply across on the bottom. We have 585 over 2.2. So we have a number of 265.9, and I know it's so tempting to round up, but we don't want to round up the dose for pediatric clients. So we have 265 as our max range. So the correct answer here is 204 milligrams on the lower end and 265 milligrams on that higher end. Question 18. The provider prescribes fluconazole PO for a child who weighs 35 pounds. The safe dose of this drug, fluconazole, is 6 milligrams per kilogram. So what is the safe dose range for the child here? All right, so let's set up our question as usual here. So let the question help you here. 6 milligrams over 1 kilogram, right? And then we're simply converting those pounds to kilos. So 1 kilogram over 2.2 pounds, and the child weighs 35 pounds for that 1 dose. Basically, 1 dose of medication, right? So now that everything's set up, we simply multiply across on the top and do the same thing on the bottom. So we get a grand total on top of 210 over 2.2. So then we just divide. So 95.4. So our correct answer is 95 milligrams. Now, question 19, the provider prescribes polyethylene glycol for a child who weighs 110 pounds. The safe dose of this drug is 0.2 grams per kilogram per day. What is a safe daily dose for this child? All right, per usual, we're setting up our equation here. So we're solving for X grams, right? So let the question help you. It's saying 0.2 grams per kilogram per day. So we're plugging in that first number, 0.2 grams over 1 kilogram, because we have to convert those pounds to kilos. So then we multiply that by 1 kilo over 2.2 pounds, and then simply plug in the child's weight, 110 pounds, over that 1 for 1 dose. Now multiply across on the top and on the bottom. We have 22 over 2.2. Then simple division gives us 10. So our correct answer here is 10 grams. Safe dose. So we're doing the same thing. Now, question 20 here. The HCP provider prescribes a certain medication for a child with ADHD who weighs 130 pounds. The safe dose range for this medication is 0.05 milligrams to 0.12 milligrams per kilogram. What is the safe dose range for this child? Now, the question is asking us to calculate the child's safe dose range using dimensional analysis and record your answer to the 10th place. Okay, so let's set this up. So first, we have to set up X milligrams, and we're plugging in that first number. So that first number here is 0.05 milligrams over that 1 kilogram. And then we're converting pounds to kilos. So 1 kilogram on top over 2.2 pounds. And simply plug in the child's weight, 130 pounds over that 1 for 1 dose. Now multiply across on top and do the same thing on the bottom. So 6.5 on top now and 2.2 on the bottom. Now we get the number 2.95. And I know it's always tempting to round up, but we don't want to do that with pediatrics. So we have 2.9 for the lower end of the dose. Okay, now how about the maximum safe dose? So we're doing the same thing, we're just changing one number. So as you can see, we're just changing that max dose range to 0.12 milligrams over that same 1 kilogram. And everything else is the same. So now we multiply across on top and do the same thing on the bottom here. So we get 15.6 over 2.2. And the number we get is 7.09. So we get the number 7 here. So the answer we have is 2.9 milligrams to 7 milligrams. So that is the safe dose range for this child here. So always remember, we don't want to round up the dose for pediatric questions.